So over the last decade, I've racked up over 20 different credit cards, which honestly, you do not need that many cards, and there are a lot of overlaps between the different issuers because of all the offerings that are out there today. I would say that in some ways, it's also easier just to stick to one card program because then you only have to deal with one app on your phone, and it's easier to make payments, and a lot of the cards from different issuers offer the same benefits. So the way I'm gonna break this down today is by going down the big three, at least I would consider the big three, that being American Express, Chase, and Capital One. And that might be upside down. This is basically like if I had to restart my credit card journey today and get rid of all my cards and just pick one issuer to stick with, like how would I decide which one's the best fit? And simply put, a lot of the cards today across different issuers offer the same benefits. So you don't want to have cards that overlap like I do. I have 20 plus credit cards. I'm not going to use some of them as much as I should because I've already used the benefit from a different card. So like I said, the three major issuers, AMEX, Chase, and Capital One, I'm going to do this by breaking it down via their flagship product. So for American Express, it's gonna be their Platinum card. For Chase, it's gonna be the Chase Sapphire Reserve. And for Capital One, of course, it's gonna be the Venture X. We're gonna start today with everybody's favorite, American Express. Let's start with the pros. So for Amex, I think everybody knows they have sort of the top tier travel benefits. To me, Centurion lounges are still the best, irrespective of how busy they are, because I think every airport lounge now is just busy. So the premium feel isn't really there anymore. But American Express definitely has the best lounges. They also have the widest selection of partner lounges compared to Chase or Capital One, just for this example. To me, that's pretty important because I do actually travel a lot, and so having the options of a lounge to go to is pretty good, especially when one is very busy and there's a wait list. I don't want to have to sit around for 30 minutes or an hour just to get into a lounge. So having those lounge options can be a good thing. I would also say the food and the service at the Centurion Lounge still is top tier. I think the Venture lounges or the Capital One lounges are pretty good. The Chase lounges are also pretty good, but they're just not at the same level as of yet. A second big pro for the Amex product is that they have probably the largest selection of international travel partners in terms of transfer partners. So if you want to move your points from Amex to a transfer partner and then book flights that way to get, award seat redemptions, I think that's probably the best program to do that, especially if you travel internationally a lot. The transfer partners include things like ANA, Singapore KrisFlyer miles, and partners that are not necessarily on Chase or Capital One, which give you more options and flexibility if you specifically are looking for international flight redemptions. You should keep in mind too that the transfer partner availability, like which transfer partners they actually offer, is directly tied to the value of the points, which I haven't made a video about this, but that's why people tend to value Amex points pretty highly because of the transfer partners that are available for international flights. The last pro I would say is that Amex probably has the biggest flex factor of any of the premium travel rewards credit cards. I mean, American Express in general is sort of the OG of the premium product in this market, right? And so they have the reputation as such. And so you have an Amex Platinum, if specifically you're getting the card just for the perceived value when you drop it on the table, then go ahead and get the Platinum because I think that's you're gonna be pretty happy with that. But aside from the superficial aspect of what the card looks and feels like, I think that Amex also probably has the best customer service, at least in my personal experience thus far. In terms of using their concierge, they've always been able to pick up the phone pretty quickly and get my questions answered or just book something for me if I need it done. Now to the cons, they're pretty straightforward. I think everybody knows that American Express is the one issuer that sometimes will not be accepted at a particular restaurant or place of business that you might want to dine at or whatever. So I think this is especially true in particular places overseas where the merchant fees that Amex charges are higher. I mean, even in the States, right? If you want to eat at a pho restaurant, for example, for those of you that like pho, some pho restaurants, like the good ones, I'm gonna be honest, they don't take Amex because, well, they probably only take cash if they're really good, but they don't want to pay the fee that Amex charges them when they could otherwise just take a Visa or MasterCard and pay a much lower fee. As of making this video, I also think that American Express does have the most complicated reward system in terms of maximizing all of the benefits in terms of the annual fee math. It should be mentioned that, Chase just did their revamp of the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which I made a video about, and kind of the maximization of those benefits, or the optimization rather. But in terms of Amex, I think they're not going to let that slide, and I would definitely expect to see in the coming months here an annual fee of over $1,000 and some new benefits that they're going to add. The coupon booking method, I think, is here to stay. Think about it from the reverse psychology. If you are the credit card issuer, you're not making money off of new partners if you allow everybody to have a $1,000, scot-free travel benefit they can use on anything, right? They're not going to make any money. So they're definitely going to add some new benefits in terms of new partnerships they've made and ways to make sure that you're using the card or hopefully not use the card so they can make money for particular rewards or benefits that they're going to add. So this is kind of just a snapshot in time of these things and the comparison that I would make between the card programs. And so the last con I would say is that for Amex, that they have the most expensive cards. I think that, again, in making this video, Chase does have a higher annual fee, but that's not going to last long. Just in my personal opinion, given that American Express has proven itself to be the premium product and wants to keep it that way. So the TLDR for American Express as an issuer, if that's the issuer you decide to go with, I would say that it's best for you if you actually travel a lot internationally and you plan to spend a lot of money on the card. I think that if you're also somebody that doesn't care so much how much something costs and prefers more kind of the premium feel of things and maybe willing to pay a little bit more for less actual value and more like perceived value, then I think that it can be a good card for you. I think this is not so much just the Amex Platinum, but also because the Amex suite of products, if you're looking at the other offerings, you would probably want to tie it in with the Amex Gold if you're doing like the Amex Duo. And that is a pretty expensive duo considering that it's already over $1,000 with the annual fees in terms of the way that it charges it right now. And I would say that it's probably going to change to be a little bit more expensive in the near future. Also, if you care a lot about lounges, which honestly I do, I feel like having lounge access is pretty big and having the options to go to different lounges as well as a Centurion lounge, then the American Express Platinum specifically, if you can get it, is going to be your best bet for just, a good lounge card because it has the widest availability of lounge partners outside of Amex as well. So moving on to Chase, all right? So I made a video about this recently because they just updated the CSR, but I want to talk through the pros and cons of entering Chase as sort of an issuer if that's the only issuer card ecosystem that you want to go with. So of the three, Chase, Capital One, Amex, I would say Chase is definitely the middle of the road. And some people out there may not agree with me, and that's perfectly fine. This is my personal opinion. I think that Chase, irrespective of the fact that they have the highest annual fee right now at this point in time, it is probably the best balance of usability and like expensiveness and perceived value. A better way of saying that would be like they have a good balance of benefits and the usability of those benefits. For those of you that know, they still have the Chase travel benefit, which is awesome because it's $300 you can spend on basically anything. That still exists. So that's a great benefit that Amex, of course, does not offer. I talked about it recently, but they also have the dining credit, which to me is still pretty good because if you're going to eat out at a nice restaurant and you just have to pick the ones from the list, then I don't think it's that bad, especially if you live in one of the target cities that they have. They did, of course, update it so that it makes it a little bit harder to use all of the long list of benefits of the $2,700, quote unquote, they send the email for your new value that you can get out of the card if you maximize absolutely everything. But I think something that remains is because of the Chase points boost and the Chase travel portal generally being what I considered before the best travel portal to use just because of the added benefit of the 1.5x on your points, meaning that you get extra value when you book through the Chase portal just using your points, so you don't have to actually transfer your points or anything. So that makes it super easy and one less step instead of transferring your points, then finding a ticket and then booking it that way. With points and miles, I would say also that Chase probably has the best list of domestic travel partners in terms of transfers. If you want to transfer your points from Chase to, let's say, United, you can't do that with Amex or Capital One. They also offer Southwest as a transfer partner because, as you know, Southwest cards are co-branded with Chase, so that makes it an obvious choice. And also Hyatt is a transfer partner, which Hyatt, I would say, is probably the best, points value of, hotel chains. And that's Chase's edges there because that's their partner, right? Hilton is Amex, Chase is Hyatt, Capital One, I'm not sure yet. So it should be mentioned also that Chase probably has, traditionally at least, the best options in terms of having a ecosystem of Chase cards, that being like the Chase trifecta. I think that might change in the near future just because of the way they're doing points boost. And if it's not available as a flat rate in terms of the bump on your points that you get through the portal, then that could devalue some of the Chase points ultimately. Now for the cons, I would say that it is still relatively complicated in terms of how to use all your benefits, especially with the new update. I know a lot of people are upset about that. And I think that's fair because if you're somebody that's not going to use, let's say, the dining credit with the new update for Chase, or some of the other benefits that they have, it's a laundry list of stuff, just like Amex has always had. And so I think if you're not going to use them, then why would you get that card? You're not the target customer, and you'd be better suited getting a card that you'd actually use all the benefits and not waste your money, an annual fee for cards you're not actually going to use. That being said, if you are doing just like annual fee math, In terms of usability, I would say Chase still beats Amex in that regard, at least right now, but it definitely does not beat Venture X or Capital One's program in terms of annual fee math, because as we're about to get into that, it is the most simple. So to sum it up, I would say Chase is a good option if you want kind of a good balance of benefits and usability, as we talked about, and frankly, if you're going to use the benefits on the Chase Sapphire Reserve card. I would say the Chase Sapphire Preferred is also something you could consider, and Chase does have a lot of different products to choose from, which is a good thing. But again, it's kind of a good balance there. Not the best and not the simplest, not the best luxury travel benefits or the biggest flex, and also not the simplest, but again, middle of the road. In my opinion, that's not a bad thing. That just means that it may be kind of the biggest market in terms of this overall piece of the pie, or if the overall pie, they may have the biggest slice, just because maybe the most people are in that category. And of course, domestic travel. So because they have those transfer partners domestically, I think that that would be a good use case for having the Chase program or a Chase card because of those domestic transfer partners. Now, finally, we're gonna talk about Capital One, okay? So I would say Capital One, I think everybody knows, is also the most straightforward as well as the cheapest card to have right now at a $395 annual fee. In terms of usability, the Capital One card cannot be beat just in terms of the Venture X we're talking about here. And I had the Venture before this card, which was also a great card at $95 a year. It is the simplest because you only need to do one thing to make the annual fee pay for itself, and that is travel, because it is a travel credit card. And you have to use the Capital One travel portal, as of making this video, to do that, which I know people complain about, and it's not as good of a UI as Chase, and you don't necessarily get better value in terms of using your points on the Chase or on the Capital One portal, but they do price match. So you can be rest assured you're actually getting a good price on the travel portal. So it's not just some nonsense, like honestly on Amex's travel portal, you're getting a more expensive price for the same ticket. Aside from the fact that the card literally pays for itself, like if you value simplicity, Venture X, I think should become obvious, this is a no-brainer. They also have very good domestic transfer partners. So I've made a lot of videos about Turkish Miles and Smiles, that being the transfer partner that they don't have on Chase or Amex as of right now. And it is a great way to maximize the value out of using your Capital One miles, transferring those to a partner, Turkish. I would say generally they have pretty good basic travel partners. I mean, they have Air France KLM, they have Avianca, and a lot of the same transfer partners, again, as Amex and Chase. There are just a few differences. And the last pro I would probably mention is that for the Venture X specifically, if you can get into the lounge, that the Capital One lounges, in my opinion, are pretty good. I mean, the food is not as curated and awesome as like the Amex Centurion Lounge, but at least the times that I've been, the wait is usually a little less than waiting in line or getting on the queue for a Chase or an Amex lounge. And it's just a good, like, peaceful, calm aesthetic. Like, there's usually, in my experience at least, Capital One lounges have a little bit more space, it feels like. So it's more open than sitting in like an Amex lounge in LAX. Like the Centurion Lounge in LAX is like in a basement and it's like really small. It's like nice, but it's not a lot of space there. So as you can tell, I'm a lounge person because I keep talking about lounges. So I would say all three cards have good lounge options. Capital One definitely has a decent one in addition to the Priority Pass ones they offer as well, of course. I haven't mentioned any of the, standard, I would say, premium travel card benefits that you get basically by having a Visa Infinite card, which, the Chase and the Capital One cards are at least. What you get with those, which I haven't mentioned, are things like TSA PreCheck, Global Entry. Those are standard. Like, those are benefits you get across all of them. So those aren't things to compare because they're literally the exact same for each card offering. But you should be aware that if you get a card that's in a different class, like below the premium travel rewards category, then you may not get those same benefits. So for the cons for the Capital One card, I would say that frankly, there's not as many luxury travel benefits. How you define luxury travel benefits, I think, is up to your own interpretation. And honestly, I'm not sure how many of those benefits you might use with an Amex or a Chase card on a regular basis. But in addition, you also have fewer international transfer partners, which can be kind of difficult if you especially want to travel internationally. Like I said, Amex might be a better option for that. Although there still are international transfer partners, you just have to find a way to move the points. Lastly, the only kind of setup for Capital One, like issuer specific setup, is the Duo, right? Which is a good one because the Saver now is no annual fee. And it's unlimited 3x. I mean, it's pretty awesome. So you're getting basically the cheapest setup of any of these, right? So if you're very just cost efficiency driven, then I would say Capital One's the way to go because you get the Saver and the Venture X. That's your Duo. It pays for itself. You don't have to worry about anything else. So in summary for Capital One, I would say that it is by far the simplest thing to use in terms of benefits. If you care about not having to think about your points or anything and just making sure that you hit the $300 travel every year and just using one card for each thing. I should have also mentioned that you get an unlimited 2x on absolutely everything with the Venture X, which is pretty solid because you don't get that on almost any other card out there. So that in itself is pretty insane. Just for simplicity wise sake as well, because you don't have to think about it, you're already getting outsized value, like a 2x point value on any purchase. Because it is the cheapest one, I would say it's also a good starting point. Like if you haven't gotten any of these cards yet, I think that it's also the lowest barrier to entry. It's not necessarily the easiest card to get. I can't give any advice on that, but in terms of it being the lowest annual fee, it definitely is. And if you want to scale up from Capital One, I think you can then build your card portfolio off of that. So I know if you've watched until this point in the video, maybe you're wondering, if I had to choose a card issuer to just pick one right now, if I could have no other cards ever again, which one would I pick? And honestly, I think at this point in my life, I value simplicity a lot, and messing around with credit card points and transferring stuff and all this is not necessarily what I want to be spending my time on all the time, besides making these awesome videos for you guys, of course. And so I would say that Capital One may be the card issuer of choice, also because my bank of choice, my checking account and everything is with Capital One as well, which I'll probably talk about in a future video. Because for banking, I think it should be, there are no benefits, right? You don't get any benefits with banking. It should just be as simple as possible, no fees. I have a Capital One account. So it's simply pay my card on time, get my paychecks early from Capital One. It's pretty awesome. So that's probably what I would go with. This is not an ad, but once again, the Venture X strikes again. Just because, it's simple. But that being said, I'm not getting rid of this or any of the other 20 cards that I have, because I think it's silly to get rid of a card when I can get value from it at some point. Or the simple fact that if you close a card that you opened a long time ago, then you lose the credit history on it, and you want to make sure you have a solid credit history with a long length of credit history. So I think that in itself is a reason why I won't close any cards. But that pretty much sums it up in terms of the comparison between the three major issuers and how I would decide which one's like a good fit. I know I didn't get too specific into any particular issuer, but I wanted this to be kind of a high level view at generally, especially between the flagship products, how to look at which one might be a good fit depending on your spending. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.